Are you being serious right now?
Yeah.
You'd let me interview you as Superman.
Sure.
Ready?
Let's do it, Cronkite.
Superman.
Miss Lane.
Recently, you've come under a lot of fire for what some might...
It's a lot of fire.
It's a lot. Today, the Secretary of Defense said he was going to look into your actions. That's funny?
My actions? I stopped a war.
Maybe.
Not maybe. I did.
In effect, you illegally entered a country.
This is how you're gonna be?
I'm not the one being interviewed, Superman. Did you consult with the president?
No.
You seemingly acting as a representative of the United States.
I wasn't representing anybody except for me.
Around the world.
And doing good.
I would question myself in the same situation and consider the consequences.
People were going to die. Hey, buddy. Eyes up here.
Your choices. Your actions. That's what makes you who you are.
Superman. He's not a man. He's an it. He's somehow become the focal point of the entire world's conversation. I will not accept that.
I cleaned your boots. I'll go get them for you.
You have a dog?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to an all-new episode of the Robert Palace Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. And on deck for today's episode, I'm going to talk about a couple of films. The first one, which has been out 2 weeks already, but you'll get my first review here. It's Jurassic World Rebirth, starring Scarlett Johansson, from director Gareth Edwards. And the new film, Superman, from director James Gunn, starring David Corenswet and Nicholas Hoult. That landed in theaters this weekend. We'll talk about the box office in just a bit. I also want to get into The Bear Season 4. I know that dropped on June 30th, all 10 episodes. But I've barely had my chance to really finish it off about a week and a half ago. You'll get my thoughts on that. And then we'll wrap up this episode with what was really a big weekend in wrestling, professional wrestling all around. There was a lot of shows going on, but I really want to put my focus on the one I was most excited about, which was WWE's presentation of Evolution, an all-female-led match card. The second installment in that series, which I believe WWE gave us one of the best shows ever produced in a very, very long time. So I'll talk about all of that. But let's get started with the box office. It's been pretty fun, and I think a lot of the heavy hitters haven't really disappointed numbers-wise. Everything's done pretty well. There hasn't really been a massive flop, so to say. You know, there's been Elio, but that was also, like, it's Pixar, but it was also original and not really promoted. It was more on the smaller scale, so, and even then, it's still in the top 5, so let's get into it here. At number 1, of course, is Superman, led with $125 million. That's a great start for James Gunn and his era of DC that he's going to be giving us. You know, this movie had a lot going against it, right? You had the the backlash of the DC and inconsistency that they've had in movies. You've had a couple of bright spots here and there with Wonder Woman. Ben Affleck as Batman himself was good, but the movies that he was involved with, not so much. The Snyder people, and not all of them are like this, but a lot of them, the internet fan base of the Snyderverse, just very vocal, and we're just going to be very anti this movie, regardless of whether it's good or not. So there was that, and the fact that the movies really haven't been as well received as, like a Marvel or something like that. So this movie really had a lot going for it against it. And 125 million to me is a great start. Now, is it gigantic numbers in like the Jurassic World, Avengers, Endgame type of stuff? No, but you don't need to do that. Now, if this had opened to like 50 million, then we can say like this thing is dead on arrival. But I think in 2025, with streaming now a thing and, movies not getting long theatrical, windows at the theaters, 125 is still means there's a lot of curiosity from people to check out a character that's been around forever. So 125 to me is a great start. Not the best, not like overly, like incredibly just over the moon type of numbers, but it doesn't have to be. It just had to be like pretty much like in the middle. And I think 125 is like a little bit over the middle. So for those that are on the internet saying how it's a flop and a failure, like you're really telling on yourself. Just say you hate everything about this movie. And hating on the movie is one thing, but to say 125 million is not like considered a modest success. Like you're just telling on yourself. So good for Superman, good for Warner, good for James Gunn and the start of his DC era. At number 2 in its second weekend, Jurassic World Rebirth bringing in another 40 million, dropping about 56% and bringing its total to 232 million. So people just love these movies regardless. I was on the No Plots, No Vibes podcast a few weeks ago, and I'll be back on again this weekend. And I said, and it still remains to be seen, it's going to be a long time until we figure out who's going to be the actual winner here. But I said Jurassic World Rebirth was going to be the highest grossing out of the July releases, which include, Superman, which we just talked about, and the upcoming Fantastic Four, The First Steps. I think Jurassic World Rebirth, in the overall scheme of things, including worldwide numbers, I think it's still going to have a higher number. I believe it's already at I'm looking at here, it's already at 500 million worldwide. So, I mean, Jurassic World, there's just something about dinosaurs that just keeps people coming to the theaters to check these out, regardless of whether the movie's good or not. It's one of those franchises that's just completely critic-proof. Superman is going to, I think, rely more on word of mouth to get it to like those high numbers. Now, I don't know if it'll make even $500 million in that range like Jurassic World, but if it can get into like the 300, 400 million, I think that's still considered a good thing for Warner's. At number 3, F1 starring Brad Pitt, bringing in another 13 million, dipping only 49%, so that's still pretty good. And it's already at 136 million. I believe this movie was close to like 300 million in budget for the Apple released film. And worldwide, it's already closing in on 400 million. So it's doing pretty well. So it's not just a domestic audience that's into it, but also internationally, F1 is more of a bigger thing. So it's doing well all around. Again, like I said, none of these high-end summer blockbusters have under-delivered as far as like box office. I think everything's doing pretty well. At number 4, How to Train Your Dragon, bringing in another 7 million, dipping only 29%. That's pretty good for a live-action adaptation. Its total is at 239 million. That's great for Universal. Of course, they've already greenlit the sequel, which I think is this movie. I don't think it's going to reach 300 million, but it's going to be definitely over 250. And then finally, at number 5 is Elio, which is still surprisingly in the top 5, bringing in 4 million, down only 30%. So it's got a little slow word of mouth. Now, this is not a gigantic hit at all. This is a bomb. But the fact that it's still making money at the theater shows that there's still families out there looking for original, animated movies that they can take their kids to. So it's got a total of 63 million. And then worldwide, it's over 100, almost close to 120 million. So, I mean, still a flop. But again, this is this wasn't a movie that was marketed to be one of the big blockbusters of the summer, so that's actually pretty good for Disney considering the fact. And, they had Lilo and Stitch, which that movie's like 6 million away from breaking the 1 billion mark, so Disney's pretty much set, and then they got Fantastic Four in a few weeks, so Disney's going to be just fine. But that's your top 5 for the box office this weekend, led by Superman. This weekend we got Eddington, starring Joaquin Phoenix and Pedro Pascal, which I'll be catching hopefully sometime this weekend. And I Know What You Did Last Summer, a reboot, continuation. It's got Freddie Prinze Jr., Jennifer Love Hewitt in it, so I don't really think you can call it a reboot. They're going to try to revamp that franchise and get it going again. I don't expect it to be number 1. Now, this is a movie that may get lost in the shuffle, but might get more views on streaming or something like that. So I do expect Superman to retain its number 1 spot. It's probably going to drop around the 50% range. That's usually normal for a comic book film. But good word of mouth, which I think this movie sits at about 86% on Rotten Tomatoes. So a good chunk of the audience and people like this movie. So good word of mouth is what's going to get this over the top. I never intended Superman to be like a $200 million opener or anything like that. There's just been too much bad mojo from the past that was going to carry on to today. So this movie kind of needs to prove itself if it wants to establish itself as one of the contenders for one of the top grossing films in 2025. But Superman will be number 1 this weekend, and the newcomers aren't going to really do much. Not expecting much from Eddington, and I Know What You Did Last Summer, I can see doing in the 10-15 million range. If it does above 20, I think that's a giant success. I don't think this movie costs a lot to make. So, but I'll talk about that next week. I'm checking that out with my kids on Thursday. We're going to an early show of it. They're really looking forward to it. So horror, not really my thing, but when my kids want to see something, of course, I'm always going to jump at the chance to go watch it with them. Anyways, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to do a double dose of film reviews for you. Jurassic World Rebirth and Superman. Stick around. This is the Robert Palace Podcast. We'll be right back.
My friend was attacked. They had a hook. Sorry. She found an anonymous note, just like you did.
Whoever's doing this, it's connected to what happened to us.
Stay behind me.
What are you waiting for?
I Know What You Did Last Summer, exclusively in theaters July 18th.
Welcome back to the show. I Know What You Did Last Summer, in theaters starting this Friday. All right, let's get to my first of 2 reviews on this show. The first one being Jurassic World Rebirth. Now, I caught this on the Thursday night opening with my buddies. We went to like a 10 o'clock screening. Pretty packed, and that just goes to show like how popular these movies still are, so I got to give it that, regardless of how I feel about the movie. Now, when it comes to the Jurassic World Park franchise, for me, it's weird how it's come and gone. So I've literally been up and down for every exact movie, and it's just funny how it's panned out that way. So, of course, I love the first Jurassic Park. Didn't like The Lost World, really. I've tried to rewatch that a couple of times, and it just doesn't land for me. I'm an apologist for Jurassic Park 3, mostly because it was the return of Sam Neill, and it's also a very brisk 90 minutes, so it's super easy to get through. And a lot of these Jurassic movies are now over 2 hours, each and every single one of them. So if you could give me a 90-minute Jurassic Park movie every single time, I bet you I would love this franchise, like all the movies. Jurassic World, I thought, was really bad, just a really bad remake of trying to capture that Jurassic Park feeling. Now, there had been a long time between the original and then that one, so I get it. For the people that do really like it, for me, it just doesn't work. Now, the follow-up to that one, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, I did like a lot better. Chris Pratt was a lot better in that role. So was Bryce Dallas Howard. They were more likable characters in the second go-round. And then the third act in that movie is just, it's very creative, and it was something that we hadn't really seen in those movies. So for that, I'm not going to say it was like the best sequel ever, but it was a worthy follow-up. And then Dominion, I had really high hopes for, because they were going to bring back everybody and stuff them into this one giant, like, epic finale, right? But nothing ever really ends. And it was a massive disappointment. You know, I'm a big Sam Neill fan, Dr. Grant, and he just wasn't the same character like he was in the first two movies that he appeared in. So that was that was the biggest letdown for me. And then the story was just so all over the place, and it had one of the worst like villains that you'll ever see in a movie. And go check it out for yourself if you don't believe me. Like, that is just top 5 worst villains I've ever seen in a motion picture. So I didn't really have any much to say more for this one. You know, I like Scarlett Johansson. She's, like I said, she's never really done bad movies. She's always entertaining in them, and I know for the most part she's done a lot of Marvel stuff in the last like decade plus. But you know, there's a couple of different movies she's done here and there, and she's always pretty good. So her being in this was a plus for me, and I liked that aspect of it. Gareth Edwards, who directed Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and he's a pretty good director. I like his style. Now, his movies and screenplays or his screenplays just in general are left to be desired. I didn't really think Rogue One was that strong of a storytelling mechanism of a movie, because that's all about the look and then all about the final couple of moments with Darth Vader. And sorry for the haters, that's true. Like, that's what you really like. It's just that last final 10 minutes of the movie. But other than that, he has good looking movies. You know, he did Godzilla in 2014. That one I really liked, with Bryan Cranston and Aaron Taylor Johnson. But I didn't really know much about this new Jurassic World going in. They brought back one of the original writers from the first Jurassic Park, David Koepp. And there's small elements of that kind of like resemble the first Jurassic Park in terms of like the scary monologues that they give you. Like there's a sequence in this new one where the Jonathan Bailey character, and I don't know much about him as an actor, but he was pretty good here. He gives us a monologue about like humans barely just being alive for like a speck of time, that, you know, the Earth has existed and that dinosaurs lived longer. So it's all just a matter of like how you look at things. Like, we're just pretty much a tiny speck. Dinosaurs have been around longer. It was a nice little speech there. Overall, I think the movie is very imbalanced. I do like what the basic premise of the movie was that they were trying to find a cure for, I believe, heart disease it was. So they needed to get some certain blood and DNA out of some dinosaurs that were left on another island. And these were pretty much the rejects that weren't allowed to be in the first Jurassic Park movie. And these were dinosaurs that were messed around with and, you know, mutated and all that stuff. There's a new dinosaur that they introduce here. I don't know. I can't remember the names of them. It doesn't matter. But the new dinosaur that they introduce looks more like the alien. What is it called? Jake's gonna kill me for this. The xenomorph. It looked like this freaking xenomorph from Alien. So they always got to find new ways to make the dinosaurs look just different. And, you know, to me, you can't beat the basic look of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I think that's always going to work. And that's one of the set pieces I did enjoy in this movie, was the Tyrannosaurus Rex portion. They had a nice little like jump scare, just little thriller moment. So again, I like that aspect of the story, right? Of Scarlett Johansson plays this mercenary, and, you know, she goes and gets with the doctors and the scientists, and they got to put this mission together, and they're backed by, you know, a millionaire, tech billionaire, and they got to go to that island and, you know, just get the blood off of these dinosaurs and not do it in a way where it's just going to put themselves in tremendous danger. But it's a Jurassic Park movie, so of course there's going to be danger involved. But the premise of it seems pretty basic on what they got to do, so I enjoyed that aspect of it. And if they had left it at just that, this could have been a quick hour 30, hour 40 minute type movie, and it'd just be straight up like adventure thriller. But I believe at about like close to like the hour mark, and again, this movie's like 2 hours and 15 minutes, 2:20, somewhere around that range. They introduce this family that's like sailing on close by where that island is. And it just goes back and forth between the mercenary team and Scarlett, and in between this family, which I get they added for like the real life element, like, you got to have like the kids in there for the scares, and the normal dad, and them just overcoming this world of dinosaurs. So I thought that was pretty distracting. I know in the audience that I saw it with got laughters out of this, so I guess they're hitting their points, so the studios are going to react to that, so that's why they add in this stuff. But I feel like it wasn't necessary for this movie. I think you had a good enough premise of what they were doing with Scarlett's character and the rest of the doctors and the scientists going to this island. And, it just becomes formulaic. They got to rescue each other, and they're on this island, and they got to run away from the dinosaurs. So there's nothing really groundbreaking in terms of what they're doing with the story here. Now, where they go from here, I don't know. I'm sure they're going to come up with one. I mean, it's like I mentioned earlier in the show, this movie's already sitting at $500 million worldwide, so they're gonna pump out as much of these as they can until they don't make money anymore. So, but it doesn't really get left in a cliffhanger. But I can see them bringing back Scarlett Johansson for another ride. She has stated that she did want to do a Jurassic World movie for her career, so maybe she just had a blast doing it, and she'll come back and do another one. She can be like the Chris Pratt for this version, even though she's not really the cell of the movie, just like Chris Pratt wasn't, and neither was like Sam Neill or Jeff Goldblum. The cell of Jurassic World is the freaking dinosaurs. But I think if we can come back to just dealing with, the regular type dinosaurs, the fact that they always got to create some new dinosaur just feels like inauthentic to me, even though the whole premise is ridiculous to begin with. But if you stick with just the regular dinosaurs, the raptors, which, by the way, I like their look in this movie. They were more, I guess, closer to what they actually looked in real life as opposed to how they've been presented in all of the previous movies. So I enjoyed that aspect. So if we could get more of that, you can keep pumping these out. I still want to see one of those like really giant adventure movies, since they're now like living in the like on Earth with the civilians in civilian life. Something like that, but I don't know. I think it's reaching like the Fast and Furious levels in terms of like how far can we really stretch this story. I know there's suspension of disbelief where you can do whatever with it, but I think we're at the tail end of it. But the fact that these movies keep making $500 million to $1 billion, which this one is on its way to doing, we're going to just keep getting pumped more of these every other year. So be on the lookout for that. So 2.5 stars for me out of 4. Again, a lot of imbalance. Nice directing, set pieces. I think they actually filmed on real locations. So bravo and props to them for that. It's a fun movie to watch. Way better than Jurassic World Dominion, the last entry in this series. So I know it's a low bar, but definitely way better than that one. So if you got nothing else to watch, and there's a lot of good stuff out there, you can still have fun watching this. It was fun with a crowd, and that's how I like to see these things. So it kind of helps the experience a little bit more, but the movie, a little left to be desired. All right, let's move on to my next feature, Superman, from director James Gunn, starring David Corenswet as Clark Kent Superman, Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, Rachel Brosnahan, I think that's how you pronounce her name, as Lois Lane, and then a whole assortment of characters in this movie. So this movie really had to win me over. I wasn't really excited at the thought of another Superman movie. A lot of bad tastes in my mouth from Justice League and Man of Steel, and those movies kind of being underwhelming. Even though Zack Snyder's Justice League it's a good watch. It's a 3-star movie, but I wasn't really left like salivating at the mouth for another iteration of Superman. But when they brought on James Gunn and him being the head of this thing, and he has the goodwill with the Guardians movies and even that Suicide Squad movie that he did in 2021, you kind of got a sense of what kind of world he was going to bring here for DC. He was going to bring it more on that Guardians level where it could really be a fun adventure of the week type of thing. So the first teaser trailer that came out, I was like, all right, it looks all right. And then as the months came and gone and other trailers and TV spots started to come on, it really started to win me over little and little. And to the point where I started to say, man, this looks like really fun. Like, I'm really looking forward to just sitting in an audience and just getting a fun adventure movie. And luckily, that is what we get with Superman. We get this fun introduction to this world that already exists. James Gunn's DC world already exists. We do not need an origin story, which they give us a little bit of a scroll at the beginning, but then we're just landed right in the middle of this Superman story. And if you're the audience, you're kind of like discombobulated a little bit. And that's okay. Like, we're supposed to be like we're in the drop zone, right? We're like in the middle of this story that's already happening. And there's a lot going on in this movie. Don't get me wrong. Like, I saw it twice this weekend. So it just goes to show you that I needed another viewing to really grasp a lot of the stuff that's happening here. Not that there's a lot of like deep contextualized stuff that that you need to understand, but there's just a lot going on. And man, did I have a really good time watching this. David Corenswet was really good in the role. Props to him for that. I thought Nicholas Hoult was a great Lex Luthor. Probably the best version we've gotten since maybe Gene Hackman himself. More sinister and just it was very well acted. So, and I know he's auditioned for like the main roles, and not just this one. Like, he auditioned to be Superman. I'm pretty sure he's auditioned to be Batman. But if this is as good as it's going to get for him in the comic book world, like, he should be very proud of himself for his portrayal of Lex Luthor, because I thought it was one of the best acted characters in the movie and really gave the movie stakes. So, as I mentioned, there's a lot of world around it, but the story is very contained, I believe, for what it can be. Because I know we're in like a universe building mode now, and not just with comic book movies, but like everything. You look at John Wick, and they got a world build from stuff like that. So that's just a type of movie making that exists now. But this is about as self-contained as you can get with a big comic book movie and a character like this. I love the tone. So James Gunn definitely puts the Guardians blueprint all over this, which is what DC needed to lighten up a bit. Now, some people may not like that, especially like the Snyder heads, who just are going to hate this movie regardless. But I think that's what you need to really make it a 4-quadrant film and make it accessible to everybody. Like, I think, someone like my mom probably is not really into these movies, but I could get her to sit down and watch Superman, and I think she would get a kick out of it. Like, it has to appeal to everybody, and I think it does. There's a couple of things in this movie that are a little bit on the nose as far as like, what's going on today with world issues. And it's there, but it's not really enough to distract what's going on, because what really pops to me is this world that James Gunn has created with these people that are just in this world, and you're into everybody, and you're into the story that's going on. And I had a really, really fun time. And the script is very witty. And I know the thing that I hate about Marvel is that every character quips, right? But there's a difference between quipping and being like obvious that you want to force the audience to laugh, and as opposed to a script just being funny. And there's a lot of moments in this story where the screenplay is just sharp and witty, and everybody's got a chance to shine here. So I really like how they've established this world, and it gets me even more excited for what's to come with DC, especially since it's going to be headed up by James Gunn. And one of the things I like that he's going to do with DC going forward is the fact that he's not going to rush things. Like, if a movie gets greenlit, like whatever, the next Batman movie for him, he's not going to put it into production if they don't have a completed script. And that's one of the things that's kind of plaguing Marvel at the moment, is that they have all these deadlines and all these projects that they got to do, right? But the thing is, sometimes they're going into these things with not a completed story. You look at something like Avengers Doomsday that's filming right now. It's supposed to come out next year in December of 2026. It was originally supposed to come out in May. Now, there's word coming out that supposedly there's no third act for that movie, and they're filming it already. Like, that's not good. And you can't work around like what you can't like improvise. Like, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But with like big scaled movies like this, I think it's better to have a complete story. And in one of the examples where it could work, but it's going to look a little flimsy, is like, take a look at the Mission Impossible movies. Now, those movies usually go into production, and I've heard this from like the actors in the movies themselves. I've watched YouTube videos on them where they talk about how they go into these movies sometimes where the big stunts are set up throughout the story, but there's not really much story around it. Like, they work around the stunts, and that's how they make the movie. And sometimes that'll work in your favor, and sometimes you'll get a little bit of a mess, like The Final Reckoning was. And I'm a huge Mission Impossible fan, but that's kind of one of the downfalls of going into production for a big studio movie like that, is trying to get a movie made with not a completed story. So I like this approach from James Gunn. Like, yes, there's going to be a lot of DC stuff and DC news, being thrown at us in the next couple of months. And, they've announced a lot of stuff already. But don't be surprised if they announce stuff, but it just never gets off the ground because A, either they don't have a good screenplay, or B, it's not even finished. So James Gunn is going to be very meticulous in getting stuff made. Now, whether or not you like the material is completely different, but the fact, as long as it gets the opportunity to be made in the way it's intended to be and not just making it up on the fly, like, I'm going to give this world a complete chance, even though, of course, I am more of a DC person than Marvel. But even then, they had to really earn my trust, and what a great start here. James Gunn has earned my trust. He did it with the Guardians movies, but I was really interested to see how he was going to approach his vision for the DC world. So now I got to revisit Peacemaker with John Cena. Makes a very brief cameo in here, not enough to distract the story, but just to show that he's in this world as well, because the Peacemaker character kind of got introduced in the DCEU, as it was called before. That was back when you still had Henry Cavill as Superman, and Dwayne Johnson was going to try to do something with it. The Flash, Wonder Woman, with all those established characters. But I think they're going to bring over the Peacemaker character into this new DC. So I got to revisit that. I know I didn't like it at first, but I didn't finish the whole thing. So I'll give it a second chance, especially now that James Gunn has earned my trust for what he's going to want to do for this DC world. Now, whether or not it sees all the way through is that's a discussion for another time. But for what he did with Superman, it was enough to get me excited. Now am I like, oh my God, I can't believe what's next? No, I'm not like that. But this was a fun movie. Like, you can go just to the movies and enjoy a fun adventure story. And yes, it's a little preachy at times, but it doesn't suck away the fun out of the movie. Like, this movie is just complete fun. And James Gunn is good at doing movies like this. So hats off to him. Hats off to the entire cast. It's just a fun movie to go see. There's a few weeks before Fantastic Four. So if you haven't had a chance to go see it, I highly recommend it. It's a very high 3 stars for me. Now, the reason I'm glowing about it is that it's almost 4 stars for me. But there are, of course, a couple of things just that I was like, I could have done a little bit without this. One of them being Crypto the dog. Now, I love dogs, but there was, to me, too much Crypto the dog in this movie. Now, I get why he's, splashed in throughout this whole thing. And that's because it's an easy sell for Warner Brothers and marketing. When I went to go see this the second time with my daughter, right away when we were in the concession line, she noticed the Crypto the dog popcorn bucket. And, there it is right there. That's what Warner's wants to grab you with. Not that she's a kid, she's a teenager already, but that was the first thing that popped into her mind when we were in line. So, Warner's did its job there, and that's why that dog is plastered all over the movie. But me personally, for personal taste, I could have done with a little less Crypto the dog and saved them for giant moments, which I think would have gotten applause in the auditorium. And that's really not why I go to the movies, to look for that stuff. But if you want the audience to pop really big for a moment like that in the movie, you could have saved them and used them less. But, either way, fun movie. One of my favorites of the year. I don't know if it's going to make my top 10, but it's definitely got a lot of rewatchability on it. I already pre-ordered my 4K Steelbook for it, so it just goes to show you, if I buy a movie, that means I enjoyed it enough to own it as a piece of physical media. So, out of the 2 movies I just reviewed, I would really, really highly recommend you go see Superman. You'll still have fun in Jurassic World Rebirth, but I think you're really going to get your money's worth and be like, man, that was just a fun movie. Superman is your choice this weekend, and the audience agreed. $125 million at the box office. I expect it to be number 1 again this weekend, and that's that. All right, let's take one final break, and we'll come back, and I'll talk about the Bear Season 4 and WWE Evolution 2. Stick around. This is the Robert Palace Podcast. We'll be right back.
Sheriff, mayor, well, mayor to be.
6 feet. I am a much better human being than you.
He's aggressive, he's dangerous, he needs to be locked up.
No! And that's why I'm running for mayor.
Can we not shut this bitch up?
Hell yeah.
You're making a mistake.
Yes!
Welcome back to the show. Eddington, starring Joaquin Phoenix and Pedro Pascal, from director Ari Aster, is also in theaters starting this Friday. Now, he's an acquired taste. I like him as a filmmaker. He gave us Hereditary and Midsommar and things like that. So, again, you really got to be into his style because his movies are a little out there. This one deals with the COVID pandemic that we just experienced all not too long ago. So it'll be interesting to see what his take on that is. Hopefully going to catch it this weekend. And yeah, going to be a fun weekend at the movies. All right, let's wrap up today's episode with a little bit of talk about The Bear Season 4. I know all the episodes dropped on June 30th. There was very little marketing for it and not a lot of buzz about it. And some of that I was talking with my friend Daniel Tucker, who I saw, shout out to him, I saw him this past weekend at my second Superman screening, which we were in the same showtime and the same row in the same theater. Like, what are the chances? Like, San Antonio's not a small city, so, you know, we synergized for that very moment. So it was nice to see him. Nice to see you, buddy, and hope you enjoyed the movie as much as I did. I'll ask you about it sometime. We'll talk. Anyways, I'm diverging from the point. So I was talking to Dan about The Bear, and I was asking why there really wasn't much buzz on it, even though this is probably the best show that FX has going for it in terms of like it getting awards nominations. You know, the Emmys were announced today, and it got nominated for a bunch. So I was wondering why the little market fare, and he said probably maybe to take away from some of the backlash, because I know a lot of people didn't like season 3. I enjoyed it, not their best, but definitely I would take The Bears season 3 over a lot of shows like greatest seasons. That's how that's how good I think The Bear is, but I think the bar is just too high, and people were kind of let down with a little bit of the more slower paced, and a lot of stuff was really felt like incomplete in that season. And I'm not gonna argue any of those points, but I will try to say that I know, listening to other podcasts that talk about this show, they were mentioning how The Bear, the third season of it was going on during like the writers and the actor strike or something like that. So a lot of that got, you know, bungled, and there was a lot of stuff from the studio as well. I know Disney and FX ordered an additional season of this show, so I think this was originally intended to be a 3-season show and nothing more than that. So I think that's kind of why a lot of people were really frustrated with season 3, because there's a lot of stuff that left hanging and a lot of stuff that really felt like untouched. And a lot of that is more fleshed out here in season 4, which really brings to a dramatic conclusion as far as like the story arc with what's going on with Jeremy Allen White's Carmy character. And that really comes to a head in this one. And they also just announced that there's going to be a season 5. So who knows what the show's going to look like as far as that goes, because a lot of what happens in season 4, there's going to be big ramifications for season 5, and as far as like who's going to be involved and whatnot, or who may be taking a step back as far as like story wise. So I think also another reason why I think the marketing was very low on it is because there wasn't a lot of time for these actors to really promote the show themselves. A lot of them are really getting huge movie careers based off of their performances in this show. You know, from James Allen White, he's going to be in the Bruce Springsteen movie coming up later this fall, Deliver Me From Nowhere. Ayo Edebiri she's popping off. She's in a lot of movies now, and she's directing as well. And then the actor who plays Richie, I don't want to mispronounce his name. I think it's Ian Bach-Moss. He's in the Fantastic Four as the Thing. So, like, these people's careers are blowing up as the show is still, like, in its prime. So maybe they didn't have a lot of time to market it as they're marketing their other projects and filming their other projects. So that may have something to do with it. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But either way, I thought The Bear Season 4 was just top-notch storytelling, cinematography, direction, acting. Anything that you want out of a great television show, you're getting. And I'm talking top-tier television, prestige television. And I'm not afraid to say that The Bear is one of those shows that's up there with like a Breaking Bad or a Sopranos, you know, shows like that. I think the lore and the storytelling is just really deep, and there's a lot of substance to it. And of course, there's just great actors involved. They also have like every season they've done like one long big episode where they have like a bunch of giant co-stars. And they did one in this season that's totally opposite of the tone that they've been doing with like the rest of this series. It was very lighthearted, and it was very it was like a good hang. You know, it was like watching an Ocean's 11 movie. It's like, oh my God, these characters are just hanging out and they're just, you know, riffing and, you know, being cool with each other, as opposed to like the ones that they've done in the previous 2 seasons where they're very dark in tone and there's a lot of stuff that they're working through in those episodes. But here it was more lighthearted, and I think what it needed, and great, you know, starring cameos. These happened last season too, but they're back again this season, like, you know, Josh Hartnett, and, you know, bringing back, you know, freaking, what's his name? Oh my gosh, there's a bunch of them. There are just so many, to Jamie Lee Curtis, you know, freaking, why am I blanking on that comedian? I'm going to look for him right now that we're talking about it. They did one stunt casting this year that I kind of didn't like, but it is what it is. And that was Brie Larson, which I thought she kind of did a little too over the top, but, you know, to me, that was really the only, like, negative aspect to this stunt casting that they did this season. John Mulaney, that's who they brought back. John Mulaney's in this. Again, there's a lot of great actors and actresses in this. Again, it was just it finally fleshed out everything over what's been leading to. And I don't want to get into it because I want you to experience the show for yourself. But I'm really curious to see where it's going to go. I don't really like shows outlasting their stay. You know, back in the day, I always wanted my shows to go, like, you know, frickin' Friends went for 10 years. And, you know, how a show like Grey's Anatomy still going for like 17 plus years, like, but their cast changes throughout time. Like, I don't know. I like it when casts stay together and they finish out the story that they want to tell. And I don't know, half of this may be Disney FX wanting more, obviously, because it's their big critical hit. And maybe half of it is that the creator, Christopher Storer, has more to tell with this gang of characters and to flesh out the Berzato story. Maybe it'll be a different story because, like I said, it kind of comes to a little bit of a conclusion this season. The last episode of season 4 is actually called Goodbye, so they probably filmed this before season 5 got renewed, so we'll see who's going to come back and what it's going to be, and maybe a completely different show. But knowing the series creator and the great storytelling he's done with this, I have nothing but trust right now, so I can't really doubt the next season that's coming until we see what it actually is. But The Bear season 4, highly recommend. It's back to the Bear that you all love. You know, season 3 is hit or miss for everybody. It was a hit for me, but, you know, I get the criticisms of it. I'm not going to shy away from it. But The Bear season 4 is out now. You can watch it on Hulu, Disney Plus, the Disney Plus Hulu bundle. I watched mine on Disney Plus because it's together with Hulu, so that's that. And I want to wrap this up with, I can't leave this episode without talking about professional wrestling, and there was a lot of it this weekend. I mean, there was a buttload of shows. AEW had their big event in Dallas, All In, from Globe Life Field. That's the Texas Rangers baseball park. That was like their WrestleMania event. Culminated a lot of stuff there. I didn't see it. You know, I really don't buy pay-per-view anymore. If I go check out AEW, I usually try to go to Dave & Buster's where they show their pay-per-views for free while you're there dining. I had my kids this weekend, so I didn't get a chance to go see that. NXT put on a show, the Great American Bash, that ran up against All In. I only saw one match from there, which was the only one I cared about was seeing the debut in WWE wrestling-wise for Mariah May, or as she's now known as Blake Monroe. She's my favorite female wrestler right now. I just think she's top quality in looks, in character, and her wrestling is also not as bad. So I wanted to see what she did there, and she had a tag match and got the pinfall victory there, so I enjoyed that. But again, I didn't see the whole show. Saturday night's main event caught very late at night. I wanted to see the retirement of Goldberg in his final match against Gunther for the World Heavyweight title. That was okay. It was good for what it was, but, you know, Goldberg had his run back in his day, and, you know, glad that he went out on his terms, and it was fun for what it was. Seth Rollins got hurt during Saturday night's main event in his match with LA Knight. Unfortunate to have that happen to him. If it is, you know, I believe it's a real injury. There's some people that believe that it's not, but the way that it played out on the broadcast made it seem like it was real. So, sucks because there's a lot of big storylines involving him, and he's kind of like the center focus of it. So we'll see. That's a challenge for creative on WWE side, but also exciting because there's also other wrestlers that can step up to the plate. So I'm excited for that and where that's headed. But what I really wanted to talk about in the show that I was really going to look forward to and was going to watch in its entirety was Evolution, which happened on Sunday. All the shows that I talked about right now, those happened throughout all of Saturday. This show was by itself on Sunday evening. This is only the second time that they've done this show, and it's a show that involves just the women. And, you know, I've said this a lot on my social media throughout the years that I believe the future, at least in WWE, the future is like female. Their depth and their roster is just so talented and there's just so many different characters that you can invest in there. And they keep signing like all these badass women, who I mentioned, Blake Monroe, who was Mariah May in AEW. She did a lot of good things there, but her dream was to go to WWE, and I've always wanted them to get her. And now that they've got her, that just adds to an already just giant roster that they've got, which includes, you know, from my hometown, from Laredo, Texas, Roxanne Perez. She's an up-and-coming rising star. Stephanie Vaquer and Julia, and you still got your veterans there like Charlotte and Becky and Bayley. So they put on a show on Sunday, and I remember the first one was also a really good show, and that was back when Ronda Rousey was still in WWE. And I was expecting the same thing here. There was a lot of people on the internet wrestling community that was in doubt of why this show was happening, and, you know, it didn't have a really good build and this and that. And at the end of the day, it's like, can they put on a good show? And I was like, yes, they can, because they have the talent and the roster to do it. So, you know, unsurprising, this was the best WWE show that they've put out, I want to say, in the last couple of years, and that includes, you know, the culminating storyline with Cody Rhodes at the last two WrestleManias at 39 and 40. I'm going to say it's even better than that, because this was top to bottom, the women with a chip on their shoulder, with little build, but we're going to say, hey, you know what? All these other shows are nice, but we're going to show you like that we're the best in the business right now. And that includes AEW, who they have some of the best wrestlers right now. Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland and Adam Hangman Page, Jon Moxley, MJF, all firing on all cylinders. But the women here just were unbelievably top-notch from the first match on the card. Becky defending the Women's Intercontinental Championship against Bayley and Lyra Valkyria in a show-stealing opening triple threat match. These women set the tempo, and then it just kept going on and on. There was a fatal four-way, which involved Roxanne Perez and Raquel Rodriguez of the Judgment Day defending the women's tag titles against Alexa and Charlotte Flair, a great new team there. The Kabuki Warriors, Asuka, Kairi Sane, Sol Ruka, and Zarya, who are on NXT and up and coming. Again, this roster of women is so deep and so talented that WWE is kind of set for the future going forward. Like, don't get me wrong, we want it to be an equal world, but there's not much to be desired on the men as far as like what the future of the business looks like. There's a little bright spots here and there, but if you want to talk about top to bottom filling out a match card, the women here, you could just do an all WWE women's, like, you know, branded thing going forward, and it'll, I think, run just fine, because that's how awesome and how much depth they have. Trish Stratus returned, and she can still go. She's one of the best of all time. I met her in person. To me, she's just like the most fantastic person, but she's also an incredible wrestler. And the fact that she's been around since 2000 and she's still putting on great matches. She put on great matches with wrestlers of the past and with the wrestlers of today, and she had a championship match against Tiffany Stratton. That was good. And then, of course, the incredible main event of Rhea Ripley challenging Io Sky for the Women's World Championship. That was just one of the best WWE main events just ever put. They even did a spot in the end where they, usually in WWE matches, they knock out the referee and, you know, shenanigans happen. Here, they kind of did a really old school twist on it, where they knocked out the referee and everybody's expecting like interference or whatever, but it's really, and again, this is a traditional championship match, and they just end up fighting to the outside and extend the fight and make it a little bit more of a brawl, which was what I liked, because WWE main event matches used to be like this when I was growing up, watching through the Attitude Era and stuff like that. There would be like these championship matches that would spill into the audience, and it would turn into a brawl before coming back into the ring and finishing up with wrestling moves and all that. So it was a nice twist, old school twist. And I say old school because it wasn't anything like out of the box new. It was just like something we haven't seen in forever, because it's usually all shenanigans, and that's from like both sides on AEW and WWE. From the men's side, there's just always a bunch of interference and all that. And it was nice to see like the knockdown of a referee just led to them turning their wrestling match into a brawl. And then, of course, the big surprise was Naomi, who's the winner of the Money in the Bank briefcase and who can cash in for a championship match at any time. She cashed in here and won the championship, and it left a lot of storylines hanging as far as like Rhea Ripley can't beat Io Sky one-on-one. She's never beaten Io Sky, and that's the same case here. So I like that you have that storyline still lingering, along with Naomi being the new women's world champion. And we're off and running to SummerSlam, folks. This is the part where WWE kind of ramps up their storytelling, and there's a couple of matches that are made already for that show that I'm really looking forward to, and I'll do a big preview show for that coming up later, because it's at the start of August. We're in the middle of July right now, so they got a few weeks to build that up, and I'll do a preview show. I'll try to get maybe Brandon McLaughlin back on here, who usually does wrestling pre-shows with me, and we'll talk about those matchups. But man, what a freaking awesome Evolution show. It's the second one. I hope they don't wait 7 years to do another one, because these women can go. I know there was a question asked to Triple H at the press conference about doing this annually, and he said, you know, we'll see, but we want to treat our women as equal as the men, meaning like we can all do it under one roof. But we know that's still not the case, because we still see the men featured a lot more than the women. And we know the women can go. So until we get an actual balance of getting featured from both the men and the women. Now NXT does this really well, which is headed by Shawn Michaels, and you get a very heavy dose of the men and the women on that show. So until we can get to that point, I think the women do deserve to have their own special, and they should probably do it annually, or not at least every other year, so you can build it up. But that was a lot of fun. So if you're a wrestling junkie and didn't know what to watch this weekend, just my own perspective and opinion, Evolution was the best thing this weekend. So that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Jurassic World Rebirth and Superman are in theaters now. Check those out. I'm going to be checking out Eddington and I Know What You Did Last Summer this weekend, and I'll talk about those movies next week. We're on the road to WWE SummerSlam. TV shows, I don't really think there's much for me to watch right now, up until maybe when I try to get back into Peacemaker. I don't think I'll review it for you, but that's probably the next TV show that I'm going to watch. Don't really do that many TV shows this year. I'm just rewatching a lot of old movies, and as I continue my journey in my acting classes and getting pumped and ready for that stuff. I'm just doing a lot of old movie rewatching, just trying to be a student of the game and learn a lot. So you'll hear more about that, because stuff is starting to get really vamped up. I'm taking my headshots this weekend, my full headshots professional. Maybe I can start going some on auditions, and that'll be a lot of fun. All right. You can find this podcast on all your podcast platforms: Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Pandora, anywhere where you listen to your podcast, whether it be at home, at the gym, or on the drive home from work. I really do appreciate it. I'm active on all my socials on Instagram and TikTok at Robert Palace Podcast. You can find it on there. You can find my X account at Off the Top Rope 39, the Robert Palace Podcast. You can find it there, searching it as well. And we'll see you on next week's episode, guys. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.